Imagine you developed a serious bacterial infection, such as a fever or difficulty breathing. What medication will come to your mind first? Maybe antibiotics will do. However, one of the medications in that group is penicillin. And the person who discovered penicillin was a Scottish physician called Alexander Fleming. As early as the 20th century, when life was still simple yet advancing, Alexander Fleming stood out as a pioneer when it comes to advancing medicine. This man was famous for his discovery of penicillin. In my delivery today, we'll talk about the life and accomplishments of Alexander Fleming and also discuss three main questions. One, how did Fleming discover penicillin? Two, what is penicillin used for? And three, what are the side effects of penicillin? So the background of Alexander Fleming, according to an article published by Salem Press Biographical Encyclopedia, Fleming was born to, and I quote, lowland farmers who made their living from an 800-acre farm with poor soil. When Alexander was 7, his father died, leaving his mother to manage the farm and head the household, end of quote. So Alexander Fleming came from a very poor background. But one thing stood out which connects to what we're discussing today. So the article continues to mention, and I quote, in all likelihood, Alexander Fleming's remarkable powers of observation were developed through his moorland hunting and fishing expeditions, end of quote. So now let's go to our first question. How then did Fleming discover penicillin? So it all happened in 1928 when an accident occurred in his lab. So on this day, Fleming's assistant, carelessly exposed some petri dishes to the open air, which led to a discovery. So according to the article, it says, and I quote, he noticed that in one of the petri dishes, a colony of mold had begun to grow and appeared to be inhibiting the growth of streptococci. Too good a scientist to ignore this invaluable observation, Fleming noted the critical connection between the growth of the mold and the inhibition of the pathogen and began to explore. End of quote. So one thing that we can take from that first point was that Fleming was observant. Now I'd like to show one of the slides that shows Fleming's picture in his lab. So the next picture shows Fleming in his lab. So we see him busy in his laboratory. Now let's look at the second question. What is penicillin used for? Well, to answer that question, let's go to the third slide that shows some of the uses of penicillin. So it shows some of the things that we can use it for. It says it's used to treat pharyngitis, tonsillitis, scarlet fever, endocarditis, other infections like anthrax, syphilis, diphtheria. So anything that involves infection, most of these infections can be treated with penicillin. But now, if I can quote what an article by the US National Library of Medicine says, and I quote, Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin is one of the most significant breakthroughs in medical history, revolutionizing the treatment of bacterial infections and saving countless lives. But let's take note of how he was referred to. He says, and I quote, he was referred to as a great man of science, end of quote. Now, our third question is, what are the side effects of penicillin? Let's look at the fourth slide. So it says some of the side effects, it can be used for allergic reactions, interstitial nephritis, which is an infection of the nephrons, and then phlebitis and hyperkalemia. So we can see here that his discovery led to what we regard today as modern science when it comes to medicine. So now, in conclusion, you can please take the slide down. Thank you. In conclusion, we've learned from Alexander's efforts that despite setbacks, if we continue to do our best and be observant, then we'll have a successful discovery. Now, to conclude, I'd like to quote one of the words of Vince Lombardi. He said, and I quote, "There's only one way to succeed in anything, that is to give it everything." So let's be motivated to do our best to keep growing and keep pushing. Thank you.
Finalement,